This is Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central. Hi, how are you?
Hey, good. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. I'm very excited to chat about about your movie. It was one of my favorites out of Sundance. I cried a lot, so I'm very excited to be.
It was such an abstract experience that wasn't there. So even just meeting people who have seen it, I'm like, oh wait, so it does exist. It's not just an elaborate prank someone's playing on me
So
too.
exactly like, oh my god, my movie, people saw it, it's happening, like it's people
Yeah.
perceived it.
I
um
mean, it's real.
yeah, so how are you feeling? It's your first feature film. Like, how's it feeling? How's it going?
Yeah, it's surreal. I've been making short films for 20 years and writing
Yeah.
features 15. There was a point where it became ridiculous to even be trying to do this thing. At some point, I was too embarrassed. When people asked me, what do you do? I wouldn't say filmmaker. I was embarrassed to say it. I would just say, I'm unemployed. Just, it's easier. So, the notion that I now made a movie, I mean, like, I'm still like flabbergasted. And my parents, my husband, even more so, because they've been stuck with me for all these years. Yeah, not only that, I was actually editing my second feature while Sundance was going on. So, and I'm shooting my third one in a couple of months. And I'm
Oh my
like,
god,
it's
congratulations.
changed. So yeah,
That's so
it's
exciting.
yeah.
So I would love to hear more about kind of where You Are Not Alone came from for you and then where the story came from.
Oh, well, I tend to normally write a kind of relationship drama, partly out of necessity, because I was always working like on DIY budgets and camcorders and things. So I just thought I'd write something where I don't have limitations. And it starts off with a genre premise. And then I was watching a lot of genre films, not specifically horror, just all sorts of stuff. It was the London Film Festival at the time, and it was like martial arts films and westerns and so on. The filmmaker would take the genre conventions that helped elevate, make the story more transporting, and then sort of move past others that weren't useful to the characters or the feelings and so on and so forth. So I wanted to do something like that. And for me, horror was sort of like a great way to I tend to be drawn to stories about outsiders, and it's a great way to have a figure that's an outsider, but is still very much of this world in every other way. And the genre element helps transport you and make you kind of more open to feelings, is my experience. And then yeah, that's kind of where it came from. I tend to mainly write from women's perspectives, because a woman's brain matches my own a lot more closely than anyone else's. Is what I gradually realized over the years through my writing. Making the story about a witch just felt natural. I don't even think I thought about it. It was just instinctive. Like, of course, it's
Oh,
going to be
cool. That's
about. So
but and I was that's interesting that you say that about like kind of writing from a woman's perspective, because what is really cool about this movie is there's a lot of like it's about gender, but in a way that I wasn't expecting, as she becomes a man, like she it occupies the body of a man and a woman in this film. And just wanted to hear more from you about kind of the gender dynamics you were thinking about in writing that, and having Navina's character almost transcend gender in a really fascinating
absolutely, yeah, yeah. I mean, and also it was an intellectual approach, because I sort of feel like, I'm me as a person, and then whatever comes out of me is shaped by that, shaped by
way.
my ideology. So I don't really monitor that while I'm writing, because I feel like the writing doesn't really come from the brain part of me; it comes from the gut, the unconscious. So as I'm creating the character, I'm like, basically Nevena and Maria is me split into two different people. And then with Nevena, I'm just like going, in this situation, what would I do? You know, and there's parallels in my own life I don't want to get into. Not that I'm a witch anymore. No. No, essentially, I kind of felt like her curiosity and feelings are guiding me through the story, and I let them guide me, and I go with that. And then the story just kind of sums up my own attitudes about life and things like gender. And, I feel like, to me, gender is something I need to transcend if I'm going to live a full life. But I'm not really, even when I say female brain or so forth, like, I'm using binary terms, but like,
Yeah.
I don't normally like to talk about this in a theoretical or intellectual way. I just like to live without that kind of boundary, you know?
Yeah.
I was happy to kind of come up with a setup where you didn't have to have boundaries, and it's like as if you would arbitrarily put them for yourself. Obviously, society, like, I didn't want to make it unrealistic. I wanted it to be true to this period. I feel like if I lived in that place in this way, there's still things that you don't change, you can't change around yourself. So you go, how do you negotiate that while still trying to live as full a life as you possibly can? And that's how it kind of came about.
Yeah, and I love that. I love that like that whole like looking at the world from a very different perspective within a very limited scope, most both because of the location and the time period. And I wanted to hear more about like filming this kind of period piece like this and like what that process was like for you to film both on location and kind of in that like in that time period.
Yeah, I mean, it was beautiful. It was like the place we shot in was kind of transporting just innately. There were so many structures that hadn't been changed since the 18th or the 19th century, or the house that when we go into Maria's backstory, that house she lives in, I don't even think we touched almost at all. The yard, I know we kind of retouched, but we just found that, which is remarkable. That hardly happens, you know. And it was, yeah, all in this kind of one village. That said, there is a lot of hidden construction and adjustment that has to happen for story reasons all along. And our production designer, Bethany Ryan, was very kind of diligent about doing all the research, and also kind of, there were locals from that village that no one under age 65 lives there anymore, but there were locals who were quite elderly who, you know, learned ways of building things and doing things that that kind of had been around for thousands of years and are pretty much about to, you know, die off basically, because that knowledge isn't being passed on to future generations. But we brought them onto our crew. So in terms of the construction that was being done, it was done with materials and in ways that it used to happen in the 19th and 20th century. Well, not 20th, 18th and 19th century. And then, so there was huge spaces that kind of then came alive that we could sort of point the camera anywhere, and the actress had like a 360-degree space to move around. And I, again, in terms of, I don't like imposing restrictions on actors either. So genuinely, you would just say, you know, talk them through the story world and explain, this is where we can go, this is how the scene starts, this is what can happen or might happen. And then they kind of run with it, and we literally run with them. And with the camera and following them around quite a lot of the as in the whole crew is snaking around, you know,
Wow. Oh my God.
around Maria. And yeah, no, I feel very lucky that I could make a period film in this way, because I tend to shoot very, you know, present day films usually in a very documentary style.
Yeah.
And it did be a possibility for a 19th century film, but
Yeah.
you basically shot it like you would have been a documentary a little bit, which is crazy.
That's amazing. Well, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me about this beautiful film, and congratulations.
Thank you. So lovely to meet you. Thanks,
Lovely to
Mary
meet
Beth.
you too.